The station was louder than her thoughts. Trains hissing, luggage wheels scraping against the tiles, voices colliding in waves of goodbyes and arrivals. Yet she stood still, unmoving, as if the world had slowed just for her to remember. In her hand, a cracked silver watch ticked faintly, its glass fractured across the center like a wound that refused to heal. She ran her thumb over it, feeling the sharp edge bite her skin. The watch had stopped 2 months ago, at 11:42 p.m. She hadn't fixed it. She couldn't. The cold wind pushed her hair across her face, carrying the scent of rain and metal. Somewhere near platform 4, a child laughed, a clear, fleeting sound that twisted inside her chest. She closed her eyes for a second too long, almost hoping that when she opened them, he'd be standing there. But he wasn't. She could still picture his last message. "Trust me. I'll make it right. Trust." The words still burned. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the glass wall of the platform. Pale face, tired eyes, the faint tremor in her jaw she couldn't hide. People passed behind her, brushing her shoulder, but she didn't move. The announcement board flickered. Her train was delayed again. Maybe it was the universe's cruel way of keeping her there, between running and staying, between past and revenge. Her phone buzzed once in her coat pocket. A message. She didn't have to check. She already knew who it was from. Instead, she slipped the phone back in, fingers trembling, the cracked watch glinting faintly under the harsh white lights. She could hear his voice in her head, low and calm, the way he always sounded before a lie. "You'll understand someday, Claire." No, she understood now. Too well. A train rushed past on the opposite track, sending a gust of air that tugged her scarf loose. The red fabric fluttered wildly before she caught it, a streak of color against the gray of everything else. It had been his gift once years ago. Now it felt like a thread she was ready to cut. Her lips parted slightly, the taste of iron and unshed words sharp on her tongue. "Every promise," she whispered under her breath, "has a cost." And somewhere deep down, she knew, so does betrayal. The train lights blurred into gold streaks as another arrival echoed through the station. Claire turned her gaze toward the far platform, her fingers tightening around the watch. Her reflection in the glass now looked like a stranger, one who had already made her choice. But what she was about to do next, no one could ever take back. Claire sat on the cold bench near platform 5, the cracked silver watch resting in her palm like a secret she couldn't let go of. The second hand was frozen, a tiny sliver of metal trapped in time, just like her. She brushed her thumb over it again, remembering the night her father gave it to her. He had been fixing an old radio at the kitchen table, his fingers stained with grease and hope. "Time doesn't heal, Claire," he'd said softly, handing her the watch. "But it reminds you what you've survived." She hadn't understood it then. Now, every broken tick made sense. Her eyes wandered across the station. A young boy ran into his mother's arms, his laughter slicing through the tired crowd. A man in a wrinkled suit handed flowers to someone who didn't come. 2 girls hugged each other tightly before parting ways. Life, it seemed, still had space for love and reunion. But for her, it had only space for memory. The scarf, his scarf, was tied too tightly around her neck. She could still smell faint traces of his cologne, the one she used to love, the one that now made her stomach twist. She had tried to wash it out once, but the scent clung stubbornly, like the past refusing to leave. Her phone buzzed again. One new message. She didn't open it. Instead, she watched her reflection ripple against the glass as another train passed by, shaking the floor beneath her. It reminded her of the night everything fell apart. The night she waited outside his apartment with trembling hands, the watch ticking in her pocket, the truth unraveling before her eyes. There had been another woman. A shared lie. A promise shattered so cleanly it still cut when she breathed. "Are you all right?" The voice was low, hesitant. She looked up. A man stood a few steps away, tall, wrapped in a dark coat. His face was calm, too calm. His eyes, though kind, held something unreadable. Maybe curiosity, maybe recognition. "I'm fine," Claire said quickly, forcing a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. He nodded once, but didn't leave. Instead, He leaned against a pillar nearby, silent, watching the departure board flicker with delays. His presence was quiet but deliberate, like someone who knew when silence said more than words. She turned her gaze away, but her chest tightened. Something about him, his stillness, his timing, unsettled her. Outside, the rain began to fall, tapping lightly on the glass roof. She tucked the watch back in her pocket, pulled the scarf closer, and stood up as the speaker crackled with another announcement. Her train had arrived. She hesitated, just a breath of time, a heartbeat's worth, before stepping forward. Behind her, the man's eyes followed. And in that quiet, suspended second before she boarded, she almost turned back. Almost. The train trembled as it cut through the rain, streaks of water racing down the window beside her. Claire watched the blurred lights fade into darkness, her reflection ghosting across the glass. Half here, half lost somewhere between what she wanted to forget and what she couldn't. She thought she'd left the stranger behind, but when she glanced down the carriage, he was there, sitting 2 rows ahead, near the aisle. The same dark coat, damp from the rain. His head was bowed, hands clasped loosely together, a faint tremor in his fingers. For a moment, she wondered if he was following her. Then she noticed his shoes, scuffed, soles thinning from miles walked. He wasn't chasing. He was surviving, just like her. The conductor passed, the doors slid shut, and the world outside became nothing but rain and noise. Claire gripped the cracked watch tighter in her palm. The glass pressed against her skin, grounding her. Through the narrow reflection in the window, she saw him take something from his wallet, a small photograph, edges worn and bent. He stared at it for a long time before tucking it back inside. A woman's face, smiling faintly, almost fading with age. Claire's chest tightened. Loss had its own language, silent, heavy, and strangely familiar. Her gaze lingered on him longer than she meant to. There was something about the stillness of his grief that mirrored her own. Maybe they were both running from ghosts. A sharp thunderclap cracked across the sky, and the train lights flickered. The sudden darkness swallowed the carriage for a heartbeat. When the light returned, he was looking at her. Their eyes met through the faint reflection in the glass. Not with curiosity this time, but with recognition. As if he, too, saw something he'd once lost. Claire looked away first. Her pulse quickened. She told herself not to care, not to feel anything, not now. She was leaving behind everything. Him, the lies, the ache. But why did the stranger's silence feel heavier than her own? The train slowed near a remote station, a forgotten stop marked by one flickering lamp. The rain beat harder against the window. She should stay seated. She should keep moving forward. Yet when he stood and moved toward the door, something inside her shifted. He hesitated by the exit, his hand brushing the railing, the faintest pause before stepping off. Their eyes met once more, brief but magnetic. Then the doors closed. The train began to move again, pulling away into the storm. Claire's reflection stared back at her, alone once more, but not unchanged. Because in that fleeting silence, she realized, some strangers don't cross your path by accident, and some goodbyes never really happen. By the time the train reached the final station, the rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than before. Claire stepped onto the dimly lit platform, her coat clinging damply to her shoulders. The air smelled of iron and night. Somewhere in the distance, thunder mumbled like an unfinished sentence. She thought she was alone until she saw him again. The stranger stood by the vending machine, his coat half unbuttoned, hair still wet. He looked up just as she noticed him, their eyes locking through the thin veil of steam rising from the tracks. She froze. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them went on quietly. An elderly couple arguing over lost luggage, a porter sweeping the floor, a woman scolding her child for running too close to the edge. But between Claire and the stranger, there was only stillness. He walked toward her slowly, his steps cautious, deliberate. And when he stopped a few feet away, he held something in his hand. Her cracked silver watch. She stared at it, confused. "Al, where did you?" "You dropped it," he said softly, voice almost drowned by the sound of another train passing in the distance. Back on the carriage floor. I didn't want you to lose it. Her lips parted, but no words came. She took the watch from his palm, carefully, her fingers brushing his just long enough to feel the tremor there. Some people carry more than just bags, he murmured, eyes drifting toward the night sky. They carry silence, regret, things they never said. The sentence lingered in the air, fragile and too close to the truth. Claire looked down at the watch, its face reflecting the station light in fractured pieces. Once, it had meant time, her father's voice, his lesson about survival. Now it felt like something else, a reminder that even the broken things we keep still know how to measure pain. Behind them, a group of passengers walked past, whispering. A man muttered something about another lover's quarrel. Claire caught the look, a quiet, judging glance from someone who didn't understand the difference between love and damage. Her throat tightened. She turned slightly, as if to walk away. The sensible part of her screamed to keep moving, to disappear before this moment became another mistake. But then she stopped, just for one last look. The stranger's gaze found hers again, steady, unreadable. No questions, no excuses, just that strange pull between two people who didn't owe each other anything, yet somehow did. Her hand trembled around the watch. The night train howled in the distance, and the platform lights flickered once. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. And in that fragile, breathless pause, everything that mattered hung unspoken between them. The next morning arrived gray and unkind. Claire sat in the cafe across from the train station, her hair still damp from the night before. She hadn't slept. Her mind kept circling the same moment. His eyes, the watch, the words he'd said about carrying silence. The coffee in front of her had gone cold. She stirred it anyway, pretending she could change something. On the table beside her lay the cracked silver watch, its reflection trembling against the window light. She reached for her phone, scrolling through the list of job confirmations she'd received earlier that week. One name blinked back at her, Haven Dynamics. Her final interview was scheduled for noon. She'd almost forgotten. The one company that could finally get her out of the mess she'd been stuck in. A bell rang above the cafe door. She didn't look up until a familiar voice asked for black coffee. Her pulse stopped. It was him, the stranger, his coat cleaner now, his posture calm, composed, but unmistakable. He didn't seem to notice her at first, but when the barista greeted him with a respectful, "Good morning, Mr. Hale," Claire's stomach twisted. Hale! Her eyes darted to her phone again. The company name flashed across the screen, Haven Dynamics, founder, Daniel Hale. For a second, she couldn't breathe. He turned then, his gaze falling on her, recognition flickering like a quiet spark. Claire! His tone was gentle, uncertain. She forced herself to nod, her voice thin. I didn't realize you owned the company, he finished softly. I didn't realize you were the applicant everyone was talking about. Silence filled the small cafe, heavy and pulsing. Claire's mind reeled. Every piece of the last 24 hours shifted, his composure, his silence, the photograph in his wallet. She glanced at the watch again, the one he'd returned to her. Where did you say you found this? She asked, barely a whisper. His eyes darkened. It used to belong to my daughter. The words landed like a thunderclap. Her breath caught. Your daughter? He nodded once. Before the accident. The glass cracked the night he trailed off, voice faltering. When I saw you holding it, I couldn't walk away. Her hands trembled as she clutched the watch. The same object that once tied her to her father was now tied to his loss. It wasn't coincidence. It was something far more cruel, some strange loop of grief and timing. Time doesn't heal, Claire. It reminds you what you've survived. Her father's words echoed inside her chest, now twisted with a truth she didn't want. She looked up at him, eyes wet, voice breaking. Then what are we supposed to survive now? He didn't answer. Claire stood slowly, leaving the untouched coffee behind. The interview was waiting upstairs. But when she walked toward that door, she knew whatever waited on the other side would change everything. The glass walls of Haven Dynamics reflected the city like fractured memory. Rain streaking down its surface, just as it had at the train station that night. Claire stood in the elevator, clutching the cracked silver watch so tightly it pressed a mark into her palm. The numbers above her head glowed upward, floor by floor, toward a truth she wasn't ready for. When the doors opened, Daniel Hale was already there, behind a sleek desk, framed by gray light. No trace of the man from the platform, just a figure of quiet authority, his expression unreadable. "Claire," he said, "you came." She nodded, voice barely holding. "I didn't come for the job." "I know." The air between them was heavy, intimate, and wrong. Her heart pounded like footsteps running in circles. He gestured toward the chair, but she didn't sit. Instead, she placed a watch on the table between them. "You said it belonged to your daughter. Then why get back to me?" He hesitated, eyes softening. "Because when I saw you holding it, I saw her again. The way she used to wait for me at the station. The same stillness. The same eyes." His voice broke slightly. "You made me remember what I lost." Claire's throat tightened. "And what about what I lost?" He looked at her then, really looked, and the silence that followed felt like confession. "I read your file," he said quietly. "The company your father worked for, before it collapsed, was funded by me." Her breath caught. "You're lying." "I wish I were." She stumbled back, the world spinning. Her father's debt, the late payments, the illness. It all came back in flashes of desperate nights and quiet anger. "So that's it," she whispered. "Every betrayal has its price, doesn't it?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't know then what it would cost. But I do now." He pushed the watch toward her gently. "Take it. It's yours now. Time has punished both of us enough." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, thunder cracked, and the city lights flickered like broken stars. Claire reached for the watch, but stopped halfway. Her reflection wavered across its surface, split by the fracture in the glass. "No," she said softly, tears trembling but unfallen. "Some things shouldn't be owned twice." She placed it back on the table, leaving it there, between guilt and forgiveness, past and present. He didn't move to stop her as she turned toward the door. At the elevator, she paused, the same sound of rushing trains echoing faintly in her memory. The station, the crowd, the wind on her face. Only this time, she wasn't the one standing still. As the doors closed, Daniel's voice came, quiet, almost pleading. "You remind me of her." Claire met his gaze through the narrowing gap. "Then remember me for walking away." The elevator descended, each floor peeling her away from what could never be repaired. She stepped into the rain again, alone but lighter. The city roared around her, alive and indifferent. She looked once more at her empty wrist where the watch had been and whispered, almost to herself, "Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever." The rain had softened by morning. It no longer fell in anger, just a gentle drizzle that kissed the windows of the small apartment Claire had moved into. The city outside was quieter than she remembered, or maybe she'd finally stopped listening for the noise that used to drown her thoughts. She sat by the window, legs curled beneath her, watching the light seep slowly through the curtains. On the small table beside her sat an open drawer. Inside it, the cracked silver watch rested quietly, face turned upward. The glass still split down the middle, but now it caught the sunlight like something reborn, no longer broken, just changed. She hadn't fixed it. She didn't need to. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, the steam rising against her face. For the first time in months, her breathing felt steady. Not peaceful, exactly, but real. The kind of calm that comes after a storm when the wreckage is still visible, yet the heart keeps walking anyway. Outside, people hurried to work, umbrellas bumping, lives colliding. She wondered how many of them were carrying invisible things, regrets, memories, faces they could never return to. Maybe everyone was just holding on to something cracked, pretending it still told the right time. Her phone vibrated once. A message from Haven Dynamics, a formal apology, an offer she would never take. She smiled faintly, then deleted it. Some doors weren't meant to reopen. For a long moment, she sat still, listening to the hum of the city blending with her own heartbeat. Then, almost without thinking, she whispered, "Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition." She didn't know if she was speaking about Daniel, or her father, or herself. Maybe all three. The wind lifted the edge of the curtain, letting a slant of light fall across the watch. It glimmered faintly, like a heartbeat frozen in time, yet still refusing to die. She reached out, touched it once, and closed the drawer. When she stepped outside, the pavement was still wet, reflecting pieces of the sky. Claire walked without hurry, her scarf wrapped loose, her steps softer now. The same streets that once felt like cages now looked like beginnings. She paused at the corner where two roads split, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. Somewhere far away, a clock struck 11:42. The time her watch had stopped, the moment her old life ended. She didn't flinch. She smiled instead. Because maybe some things aren't meant to restart. Maybe they're meant to stay paused, so we never forget where we decided to begin again. And perhaps that's the quiet price of survival, learning to love what didn't stay.